Hello and welcome to Focus on Liberia. Welcome to this edition of our broadcast here. Focus on Liberia, always broadcasting from our headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. The program you are watching is the Freedom of Information Hour, always hosted here by Julius T. Jensen. He's based today, and so I'm filling in. Welcome. Do us that usual favor. Share the show. The topic that we got for you today is very, very essential for the forward march of our country. Security. If you have not secure, then life is not worth living. But we are talking about security in a much broader context that has to do about the survival of our country, how our democracy can be protected, how you can be free to exercise your democratic rights in a country called Liberia. Fellow Liberians, you need to be here. You need to share the show and listen to this very important topic. We must survive as a nation. We must be peaceful as a nation. And that is the essence of this broadcast. And so welcome. Well, let us welcome our guest, Mr. James B. Colley. Mr. Colley, it's good to have you. This is your first time joining us here. I focus on Liberia, so we offer you our ceremonial cola. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be on your show, and I'm also humbled as well to appear on this platform. And thanks for the great work you are doing for our country. From afar, I'm feeling the impact of your work, and I think collectively we can rebrand and remodel our country into what we desire it to be. Thank you so much. I'm honored once again, and I look forward to a very fascinating interaction.
Thank you so very much. It's good to have you too, my dear friend. And so, folks, the topic for today on this Freedom of Information Hour here, I focus on Liberia, is 2023 elections. Many of you love to vote, right? And maybe some of you not. And if you don't, please do something about that. A look into internal and external security issues. If there's no security, we can't vote. You can't vote for your favorite candidate. So let us talk security. That is the crumbs of the reason you will be voting. That will even allow you to be able to exercise that democratic and constitutional right. So let us talk about security. And Mr. Colley, coming back to you, let's know you a little bit. Who is James B. Colley? Let's hear from you.
Great. So I'm James Vicoli, as you already know. I hold a bachelor degree in political science and communication. And I'm currently a master's candidate doing my master's in international relations, global peace and security here in Nicosia, Cyprus. Yeah. So I'm basically like I am kind of familiar with local international politics, and I'm also like a security student, international relations and security issues. So I deal more like with security from a theoretical and conceptual background. And I'm hoping someday, of course, to have a practical, hands-on experience with security issues here. And I also, I was a former student leader also at AME University,
Okay.
Yeah, we did a lot of student activism for a couple of years. And I was also into youth activism as well. Partly work with some youth organizations, and participated also in ensuring that our democracy thrive, like social democratic awareness issues I was also involved with. And upon graduation, I worked with the Kana Group. You're also aware of the Kana Group, as a qualitative researcher.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I'm also sometimes a motivational speaker.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
All right. So I hope some of that, motivational speaker skills our people will benefit from it today, because look, Mr. Colley, you know it well. Liberia needs that. Liberians need that, given where we're coming from and where we are and where we want to go We
Right.
really do need that. Again, let's get started. Let's get into it, folks. Again, the topic 2023 election, a look into internal and external security issues. So, folks, we are talking security that will serve as a foundation for just about everything, but in particular, comes 2023. So, what, Mr. Colley, let me roll in my first question here quickly. What constitutes security? I mean, let's look at security for what it is, first of all. What constitutes security?
Great. And what a perfect way to start.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perfect way to start.
Mm-hmm.
So security basically is the in the grand scheme of thing is ensuring that there's safety,
Mm-hmm.
there's security, the safety from harm and all that.
Okay.
But to look at security more in the contemporary period, we have to trace the what we call the etymology or the historicity of security. We
Okay.
have to look at security from a definition of a historical context and
Okay.
how did we come to now consider security in the context that we now look at security. So we have to trace security first, looking at state security,
Mm-hmm.
because the whole context of security actually emerged, during the French Revolution, and then came to the American Revolution and all that. We began to experience security issues around the Cold War period, when security was perceived as more like a state security issue.
Mm-hmm.
The state was the reverent object or the object on threat.
Mm-hmm.
Because in security we have three cardinal issues. We have, of course, we have the actions, we have the reverent object. So the reverent object is what is under attack, what is the existential threat that the state is faced with.
Mm-hmm.
So, and so we also look at human security issues as well. So security basically is, how do we ensure, for example, that a segment or our society is protected given what issues we consider to be under threat, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if, for example, the threat is um, our territorial sovereignty is the
Okay.
threat, then
Mm-hmm.
we have to securitize. Then that becomes what we call state security.
Okay.
Say, for example, we're experiencing what we call security dilemma, like encroachment on our borders.
All right.
So there has to be an action taken. So to answer your question, what constitutes security is to look at, for example, what do we decide? What do we consider security issues? It may be a more like a philosophical answer to your question, but we have to look at, again, what constitutes security issue in our own context.
Mm-hmm.
Are security issues, for example, economic issues? Are we confronted with illiteracy, for example? Do we have a huge cohort of our young people who are on drug? Do we have unemployment rates skyrocketing? Like, do
Okay.
we have hike in prices of goods and services? Is our government performing? Are they performing? Is the government performing up to standard? Is the government performing in line with what they were elected for? How are we affected? Can you walk on Broad Street at night and you feel secure, like without your phone being stolen from you, without armed robbers coming to your house, without you know, your vehicle tire being stolen, your battery being stolen? So those are security issues. So if a society, for example, can ensure that James Colley can walk down the street of Monrovia and
Right.
his phone is not stolen, if the society can ensure that James Colley, of course, can remain at home without armed robbers, bumping into him and placing him on threat, then of course those are security issues. If we can ensure that we have an election that is void of
Mm-hmm.
violence, void of catastrophic,
Mm-hmm.
then of course that is a security issue. If we can ensure that our borders are secured,
Mm-hmm.
where there can be infiltration
Right.
of mercenaries, that becomes a security issue. So security is a broad concept. So as we move on, we'll unravel the concept and break security down into subsets.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I like what you just provided. But when you look at our country and you spoke to the demographics a little bit with emphasis on the young people there, but we have our mothers and our fathers. This is no disrespect to that other very significant population of our people or of our country, to put it right. Our old man then, to put it in our Labren Palan, our
I
papa
like the
then,
balance.
our sister then who plant the rice in the villages. How do they really understand their security? Because the man think, well, I'm going on a farm, all I see is maybe how to cross. How can they relate to security? Do they actually have a sense of security?
Well, they do. They do. Unlike that, they may not understand it from. They may not understand security from the way we do understand it.
Hmm.
So, like I earlier mentioned,
Hmm.
before this time, security was viewed just from a state-centric approach, like the
Right,
state saw security like through military and all that.
right.
But in recent epochs, there's been a reconceptualization of security to include economic security,
Hmm.
societal security, ecological or environmental security, and the list goes on societal security, then
And maybe
military
personal
security.
security as well.
Yes, personal security, of course, is part of societal security,
Okay.
it's part of
Hmm.
societal security. So, security right now isn't like through just military. States are now drifting away from investing more into um, military capabilities to
Hmm.
now investing into economic, societal, environmental issues. Of course, one of the most trending security issues now globally is environmental security. You
Okay.
remember some time ago we had COP26,
Right.
you know, in Glasgow, where we're talking about environmental issues, talking about
Yeah.
climate change,
Climate
global
change.
warming, and all that. So, global warming is an existential threat. It's an existential threat,
For
security
humanity.
issue that everyone is confronted with, irrespective of what part of the world you are
Mhm.
confronted with it.
Yeah.
So our mothers back home are also confronted with security issue, and their security issue primarily are the environmental or ecological issues. I remember I spoke with someone in Liberia some time ago. They told me we used to plant our pepper back in our farm, it used to grow, but nowadays it doesn't grow any longer. We are experiencing flooding, we are experiencing tornado wind, it's destroying our livelihood. That's
Right.
environmental issue.
Okay.
D12 is almost being consumed.
Oh,
Now
that's the
central
alma
Monrovia,
mater.
yes, central Monrovia is at the brink of being enveloped, by the sea rising level from
Mhm.
the back of the executive mansion. We also have from PHP area. West Point, of course, is one of the things we've talked about over and over.
It's
So,
exactly.
yes,
So,
it's a
Mr.
threat.
Colley, Mr. Colley, I like the dynamics, if I can pull it that way, of security, all the legs that you've been able to put together for our audience to understand. Then the book people call something the security apparatus. I
Right.
think that they mean these are the institutions that are charged with the responsibility of providing security. Talking about the police, the military, the paramilitary, and maybe the intelligence as well. So let's talk about that a little bit. How essential is that component of security, and how should a nation look at the security apparatus of the state?
Great. And this is where I like to make this point. And this point may
Mhm.
be a bit political, but yes, of course, it's important to stress that point.
You're a
We are
student of
yet
politics, though.
Yes, we are yet to understand. We are yet to reconceptualize security within the
Mhm.
context of within the global context.
Right.
I mean, Liberia, we still see security from more like a military perspective than looking at security to encompass economic issues, societal issues, environmental issues, and that is why we keep failing. We keep failing every other time. We keep failing the Millennium Challenge stuff. We fail
Mhm.
now. The UN Sustainable Development Goal. We Of course we will fail because we still see security from like having a military that holds arm and ammunition,
Mhm.
having a riot police and all that. We're yet to read. So looking at the composition of our security apparatus, well, what do we see? We see, of course, the AFL. Of course, with no disrespect to them, but we have a military that that doesn't really have like a real skill set to combat, contemporary security issues, unlike looking at security from, a state-centric approach, right?
Mhm.
Now, we also have, for example, EPA that should be focused on looking at environmental issues.
Mhm.
Well, I'm yet to see what they do. I'm yet to see the work that they do. Of course, environmental issue is an existential issue. Recently, we had the Glasgow conference,
Right.
and the government was represented. But who did I see? I saw the government send group of young people who may necessarily not have the skill set to project the state interest,
Mhm.
the state interest with respect to security issues. So security, the apparatus we have are not doing well in terms of looking at security from the significant and broader context of security. Unlike that, they focus more on state security, which they are not doing well. Because
Right.
if you're focused more on state security, then we should not have porous borders. We should not have instances where we have broad day robbery ongoing in Monrovia, where we have armed robbery taking place.
Mhm.
Those are societal security issues, which I think they are not focused on much. And on the economic issues, of course, where there should be job availability of jobs and opportunity for young people to work, skill set given to young people is a security issue as well, which nothing significant has been done as well. So it's a whole big puzzle that we need to sit back, take some deep breath, and we put together our eyes and begin to work properly. Otherwise, our security will always be fragile, you know. And the reason we have a fragile security sector or
Mhm.
fragile security system is because we have functionaries and architecture of government is not working. You know, the last time we had um of course our war ended somewhere around 2003. Then we had this whole thing about peace building effort,
Mhm.
which is a component of what we call responsibility to protect. And under the responsibility to protect in international relations, we have to prevent, react, and rebuild. So the rebuilding process took a form of security sector reform under President Salif. So the security sector reform took into consideration, hey, over time, we've had a military that has been ethnicized. We had a military that had been regionalized, for example. So how do we ensure that the military is not ethnicized? Because it becomes problematic to have a military that hail from predominantly one region of the country. So the military of a country must be a reflection of the geopolitical balance. The military of a country must reflect geopolitical balance, just as a president will constitute his cabinet, and the cabinet must have geopolitical balance. So by doing so, one one part of the country is not seen to be marginalized or perceived to be marginalized. So there was a whole security sector reform where the military now was taught to, hey, you must have certain core skill set. You must not only be a group of people who know how to hold arms, firearms, but you must have, for example, like a skilled. So over time, we begin to see our military now involved with civic activities. They're now trying to build rules and provide some other societal awareness on issues as well. So yes, it's important, it's good, but I think there has not been much done in terms of handling other existential security issues, such as economic issues, such as
Okay.
environmental issues. And so if we don't handle these issues, if we don't tackle the issue hands down ahead of elections, we
Mhm.
will be confronted with problems. And that is why we'll have electoral violence. We'll have young people, ganking
Yeah.
up against each
And
other,
exactly. And we'll
and
come
we'll
to
not have a
that.
civil discourse in politics.
Yeah, we'll come to that. As you were speaking, I was just paying, attention carefully. How some things that sometimes people don't see, having connection to security sometimes might be the bigger security issues. The
Mhm.
issue of, because we're talking about election, we're talking security, but a little more emphasis on elections here, right?
Right.
So look at our roads. So let's say you have election going on and you have to transport like ballot boxes and you have to move personnel. Why if they stuck on the road?
Right. Like
So
I've traveled the country,
right. Mhm,
CA. I've traveled the country,
mhm,
and one of the toughest routes to travel in Liberia is along the southeast, where you come from.
Right.
You know, I rode on motorbike from Buchanan,
Mm-hmm.
from Buchanan to Riverses, from
Mm-hmm.
Riverses to Sino,
The sun.
from Sino to Grand Cru,
True. Oh
the
wow.
home county of our president.
Yeah.
So I spent over 13 hours. At some point, we had to literally, place the
Leave the
bag on
bike.
our head. Yes. So that's a security issue, right?
Mhm.
Now, you know what that does? That creates a floodgate for, electoral anomalies. That creates a floodgate for, discrepancy,
Mhm.
electoral discrepancy. That creates a whole lot of problem. Now, if if the country is disconnected with role, of course, role becomes like a social issues.
Exactly.
Rules are social issues because one reason we elect a government, we delegate some significant portion of our inalienable rights to the government for the government
Right.
to provide us what Aaron Demartisque consider basic social services, like a
It's,
social contract theory. So
right.
in the event where the government cannot play, is part of the bargain, then it becomes an issue, it becomes a problem. So
And
imagine
Mr. Colley,
yeah,
hold on there, Mr. Colley. Talking about that scenario, you are expanding on, as a component of security, the barrels, the time that could even cause the delay of an election result, right?
definitely.
So let's say this person was transporting uh, the ballot bags, all right, with the
Mhm.
vote cards in it and to be counted, and he's stuck on the road for days. And there's anxiety, building up. People, the candidate wants to get the result, results in other area being announced. That can cause
Right.
serious problem.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, like we are on the same wavelength. We are
Mhm,
saying the same thing.
mhm.
So that becomes societal security issue which the state has to deal with. The state is under obligation to ensure that its people are safe, its borders are safe, right?
Mhm.
So as a government, you are not elected just for one principal reason. Your responsibilities are multifaceted, right? You are to protect, internally and
Mhm.
externally the security of your subjects, your people, right? So you are to protect your territorial sovereignty, how what we call territorial sovereignty, and you
Mhm.
also have to protect your internal dynamics as well. So the internal dynamics become the societal issues, the human security issues that you have to deal with. So, for example, the country is disconnected.
Right.
The whole southeast is disconnected. No road, no electricity, no water. People are poor, no food. People are unemployed. As an economist would say, there's a twin evil. In macroeconomics, there's unemployment, then there's inflation in the country. So those are all issues that are imminent threat to insurrection and instability.
Now you're
So
talking
one
national
thing,
security.
right? One thing a state needs to avoid is to avoid having external, existential threat as well as having internal existential threat. So
Thank you.
internally, as we see Liberia right now, there are so many threats that could potentially lead to, you know, rioting, and rioting could lead to insurrection, and it could lead to conflict as well.
Thank you.
So we have to be very careful with these things. Like we have a population that is idle,
Mhm.
it's an existential threat that we have to deal with. How are we dealing with this? We have a
Thank
huge group of young people who are on drug. How are we dealing with it? Right now, we have on top of that, we have unemployment. How are we dealing with it? Now we have inflation. How are we dealing with it?
thank
We have social issues as well, like certain group of people wanting to have certain kind of recognition and identity issue.
you. Right.
How are we dealing with it as a state? Or are we only focused on, for example, going to elections without addressing the underlying issues that could plunge our country into further chaos? So let's
Thank you.
address the underlying issues before focusing on elections. What are the underlying issues? The underlying issues that could potentially lead us into, another, 14 years of civil fracas,
Mhm.
right? The underlying issues, right? It's been how many years since we experienced relative peace? Now
Exactly.
even in now even in Central Monrovia, electricity is virtually non-existent. There's no
Exactly.
water, right? There is no physical security. Like people are threatened, their human security is threatened. I can now walk on Broad Street, for example, with my iPhone in my hand, even with my techno phone.
Mhm.
I can now walk with my gold chain on my neck. Somebody's going to slap me and take my chain, and there will be no redress. I remember the other day on on Benson Street, I heard there was this broad day armed robbery by 8 p.m. 8 p.m. broad day robbery. So
Wow.
those are yeah, those are issues that we have to deal with instead of just focusing on elections. Elections are good, but what guarantees election? It's security.
Yeah.
It's not just
Thank
about
you.
walking to the ballot box and voting for for someone for another 6 years. It's about how can the government that has the responsibility of ensuring that there's security guarantee security first before going to elections.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. James B. Colley is our guest, and the topic we are discussing is 2023 election, a look into internal and external security issues. Folks, security is, in democracy, when the president is elected for any country, those of us who read politics, who read government, they say the number one responsibility of the president is to protect the nation,
Uh-huh.
and that is security.
Right.
And but let's come to another component of it. Then we can dive now into the election connections.
Okay.
That is intelligence, right? Intelligence, and you have better understanding of this. But my little understanding is that this is the sector or the arm of the security apparatus that gathers information that may present some eminent, threat or action by some group of people that might, disturb the peace. Based on your knowledge, how is Liberia doing in terms of intelligence gathering that you think that, may avoid anything potential?
What I think we are doing poorly, we are performing very poorly. I'm being honest with you.
Mhm.
Um, we One thing we have to avoid, any country that is serious about handling security issues have to avoid, uh, is to avoid politicizing state security issues. And I say this from the depth of my heart. We have to avoid politicizing state security issues. Now, um, NSA, for example, is that arm of the government that is clothed with ensuring that there's intelligent gathering and all that.
Mhm.
But for the last couple of years, this is my personal observation. It may not be based on any empirical statistics or empirical evidence,
Mhm.
but for the last couple of years, my observation has been that the intelligent gathering agency of our country is kind of politicized. So,
How?
well, of course, we have some agents of the security apparatus that are, you know, involved into politics, and there has to be the distinction from politics to security, especially when we're discussing security from more like a military
Mhm.
and intelligent perspective. We have to detach security from politics. You know, we have to detach security from politics. My understanding is that we have um, two or three officials of the intelligence gathering agency that own, media institutions. And I've listened to a couple of these media institutions, their reportages, it's political. So of course, if I'm the owner of a radio station and I am an official of a security, like a security official,
Mhm.
and my radio station, of course, is reporting something that is purely political and that targets opposition and that propagates government information. And the radio station is not even being neutral in its reportage, and that becomes a problem if I cannot regulate those that I employ. You know, I'm
So,
not
so
saying, I'm not in any way saying that there should be this whole censorship on the media. But of course, the owner of the media institution has to ensure that the media is ethical and is balanced in their reportage. But if that is not the case, then that becomes a problem.
let
So
me,
a hint,
Mr. Colley,
go on.
may I get your take here? Security personnel, the individuals who are charged with providing security for the state and its people. Um, Tell me conventionally, or maybe in terms of principles, should they not have any political leaning? They should not have linkages to political parties whatsoever? Could that be any potential conflict there, or may there be? Is there any risk there? To have security personnel, having party connection and all that.
Exactly, it's a problem. It becomes a problem, especially when we are looking at security, like hard security, because we have hard security.
Mhm.
In this context, your
Mhm.
question is directly related to hard security, where
Okay.
we're looking at defense of a country, looking at
Mhm.
external threat and all that. So, if you have, for example, um, one reason we had the whole security sector reform under President Salif was to discourage a military or a security apparatus that is loyal to individuals or loyal to politicians or loyal to political party.
Okay.
Remember when President Doe took over in 1980, between 1980 to 1985, he had
Mhm.
a military that was predominantly his ethnic group, the
Right.
Crown, right?
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
had generals and captain in the military who were Crown people and all that. So when we had the incidents in Nima County, the Crown and the Mano and the Gio people, you know the story of what happened.
Right.
The
Exactly.
military was the military was loyal to Doe, because they had that identity connection.
Mhm.
They had the identity and political connection. So we saw what happened. There was this whole massacre and all that. Up to now, we are still trying to recover from the nemesis of what happened between, you know, President Doe and Prince Johnson in Nima
You know,
County. There's still
fast
this
forward to
rift.
Charles. Fast forward to Charles Taylor. That would be an interesting example then.
Yes, So there's a whole issue that we have to deal with. So the point that I'm making is
Mhm.
the security is to be loyal to the state and not to an individual, not loyal to a political party. And that's why military people, security personnel will always not want to, actively get involved with having political conversation.
Mhm.
You know, you are not denying them their right to vote. Of course, they have the right to vote, but they are prevented principally and honor some ethical constraint, ethical principles, not to get involved with discussing politics.
For politics.
Because with that, it compromises, because you are to protect the citizens, you are to protect the state, and within the state you have subsets. You have people who are loyal to political institutions, who are neutral, people who are against the ruling establishment, who support the opposition. So your responsibility is to ensure that everyone is secured, everyone is safe. Whether I support the CDC or I support Unity Party or I support the Liberty Party, whichever party that I support, your responsibility is to show that I'm safe. But if you are a security personnel and you are aligned and in bed with the ruling establishment, what does that say? That tells you that even oppositions will not be, protected.
Will
You will
not be
seek to
protected.
protect members of your institution. So it becomes a
Mhm.
whole problem, Then
And
the neutrality is
earlier,
questioned. You cannot be neutral any longer.
yeah, earlier, Mr. Colley, yeah, I said fast forward to Charles Taylor because that is in a time period in our country. We can look at to really get a much deeper understanding of the importance of security and security personnel, you know, owing their duties and responsibility to the countries and its people as opposed to, the president, for example, because during Charles Taylor time, you had the SOD. I mean, I
Hmm.
don't think the SOD was about protecting the citizen because we saw them flocking
No,
the
they were.
citizen.
They were
The
about protecting
ATU,
the
they were
president,
not about
loyal to
protecting
the
the
president.
citizen. They were terrorizing. I mean, in that situation, if you were to have election, let's say the president said, "Look, anybody try and something, right? What would they do? They would
Hmm.
just go after the people to secure the presidency."
Exactly. I like the connection. That's a very
Mhm,
perfect way to connect it.
mhm,
You know, this gives a clearer picture why
mhm,
the military or the security apparatus, is not to be loyal to an individual but the state.
mhm,
There's only one apparatus of security that is, you know, to protect, and that institution is squarely clothed with the responsibility of protecting the presidency, and that is the EPS.
mhm.
you know that is the EPS is squarely clothed with the responsibility of protecting the presidency. So with that, it's understandable if you have, but again, that does not mean that the presidency is not an individual.
Mhm.
Are you getting this point? The presidency is not an
Yeah, I
individual.
mean,
So
it's
for
the highest
example,
office in the land.
yes, so for example, President Weah is president now, so the EPS is protecting him. Now, if he's out of the presidency, whoever becomes president, the EPS is to protect that person.
Person, right.
So that is it. So you are not loyal to an individual, but you are clothed with the responsibility of protecting the presidency. So if James Colley becomes president, you're not going to say, hey, I like president, I used to like President Weah, and I think I am to protect, I am not to protect James Colley more. I'm to protect him less because I like President
Or
Weah,
you,
or
you, you
I like
start
President
leaking
Kelley.
security duties to
Yes.
former
And you start to leak
President
intelligence
George
to us.
Weah,
Yeah.
who is now in opposition, for example, and putting
Yes.
the president in a vulnerable state.
Of course. Then you create a whole national security issue. It becomes a problem. you know.
So let's
So
look at
like I
the
said,
security. Let's look at the
security.
police a little bit. Let's look at the police a little bit. The police, plays a very essential role in maintaining internal security. Let's draw an example from today's police that we have. Uh, there are many police officers we've seen in party T-shirts during party rallies. We know our current police director, Patrick Sodu, is a seditious, and he attends CDC events, in fact. And we also seen how the police has been heavy and on opposition events as opposed to events that have been carried on by the ruling government. What is the
Right.
threat there? What is the threat there when we're talking elections?
Now, you are just bringing this to my attention that
Mhm.
the IG is a partisan of the ruling establishment. I didn't know that, right?
He is.
But
Mhm.
yes, I didn't know that. But like we earlier said,
Mhm.
it's a problem. It becomes a problem. Now, we live in a democracy. Liberia is ought to be a democratic state where the people have the right and the responsibility to query their government, to call on their
Mhm.
government's attention. Now, and the state security is under legal obligation to ensure that the people are protected, the people are safe. So I mean, there's several ways we can call on the government's attention. We can have, assembly. We can have civil disobedience. We can have protest. Of course, protest is another way of calling on the government's attention. We can have remonstrance and all those forms of protestation. Now, in a democracy where the people are supposed to call on the attention of the government when they're faced with issues, And on the other hand, we have a security that is um, a partisan security, then that becomes an issue. You can just imagine how the security is going to engage the people. You know, I remember the June 7th protest. I think I was the June 7th protest. The June 7th protest is a classic example, right? It's a classic example when the people assemble to call on the attention of the government that, hey, certain things are not right. You need to do this. You need to do this. And I remember how that ended. The people were, madly treated. They were treated with aggression and force, which is, of course, not the perfect way to proceed in a democracy. The people have the right to assemble and to call on the attention of the government. So I think what
Mr. Colley,
happened on June 7th,
hold on, Mr. Colley.
yes,
Hold on. Talking about the June 7, I have a good memory of that particular protest. The June 7 protest was the popular one.
right,
What happened was there was this huge intimidation prior to the protest. The
right.
government display, their security strength, and people heavily armed and all that. Some people said that it was a tactic to scare the people from examining, but some people
Mhm.
said, well, it was the government trying to show, hey, we are equipped to provide you security and you can come. So there's an argument there. So that June 7 protest, I don't see where the people were terrorized, like tear gas. But then there was another protest after that. I think it was the January 6th protest. That was the one the security was very heavy-handed on the citizen. Go ahead. I just want to make that clear.
Okay, then that's perfect.
Mhm,
Because I remember there's this protest where people were injured, and we
mhm.
had the security using ammo tanks.
Yeah,
You remember the
that
water
that's
cannon?
the January 6th protest.
Okay, I think that's the protest I'm referring to.
Mhm,
In fact, some international media, I remember Al Jazeera took the story, and it was a whole
mhm,
conversation Al Jazeera regarding the
mhm,
the the unethical conduct of the security apparatus.
mhm,
I even remember, I think BBC also had an interview with some top level security officers and agents in our country, and they were queried, and that was also referenced in the State Department report of the security being unethical in their approach, to people. So this is basically the link. You cannot have a security apparatus that has party leaning or political leaning. It becomes a problem. It becomes the whole conflict of interest. How do
mhm,
I deal with people who are not from, my political party? Whereas I am clothed with the responsibility of protecting everyone, opposition, non-position, as Lehman Bowie will say, non-position, and even the ruling party. you know. So it's a whole issue that we have to handle. We have to ensure that people who are admitted into our security sector are not do not hold any loyalty to any political party. They wouldn't be denied of their right to vote, though. But of
mhm.
course, that party loyalty and that political alignment has to be disconnected in order to have a security sector that is that is ethical and will dispense their duty in accordance with in accordance with security etiquette.
Thank you, folks in cyberspace. You are watching Focus on Liberia. This is our program, the Freedom of Information Hour. Our excellent guest for today is James B. Colley, who is joining us from all the way somewhere. Then the topic is 2023 election, a look into internal and external security issues. We must be secure. We must feel secure. I mean, have a unique sense of security based on all that is going on around us. For us to have, a kind of election that really people can be free, to participate. Mr. Colley, before we go to comments and have our viewers interact with you, let's get into it here. So, how is security important in promoting and preserving our democracy?
Great. So, firstly, let's look at democracy. What is
Mhm,
democracy first? It's that would be a perfect way to begin.
mhm,
First, in the American context, like a
mhm,
conventional context of democracy, is a government by the people,
mhm,
for the people, and of the people, right? So,
mhm.
democracy has pillars. So, to look at the pillars of democracy, we look at, for example, a free media, a
Mhm,
media that is not censored by the state, by the government.
mhm.
We look at freedom of speech, for example, freedom of speech, and the right to vote. You know, is a very integral component of democracy. The right to vote, and so democracy exists before and after elections, right? So
Yes.
democracy is not just only the Amanda I wait to before elections, but
Mhm.
after elections, what do we do? Becomes more of a democratic assessment of the government. Now, how does opposition checkmate government in ensuring that government does the right thing? That's democracy. How does the government ensure that the welfare of the people is taken care of? That's democracy. How does the government ensure that there's this polarization of media institutions and that media institutions are not censored and that media institutions can freely broadcast? Right?
Mhm.
That's democracy. And that ties into security as well, right? Because the media exists when there's stability in the state, right? The
Yeah.
media exists when there's stability. James Colley can freely express himself, which is a component of democracy, when there is, you know, a space given him where he's not being coerced, where he's not being tortured, where he's not being harassed. James Colley can, rally people to go at the legislature and petition the government to take on certain action. But in the event where we have a police state, we have a state that is insecure, that of course threaten James Colley's survival and threaten the survival of who be protesters and demonstrators, then there's a problem. Then there's a problem. In the event where a family, an average Liberian family, goes to bed without food,
Mhm.
you know, it hinders their ability to consciously make democratic decisions. In a society where you have majority poor and an average family survive on $1 a day, it becomes an issue. So there is a nexus between democracy, security, and economics, right?
Yeah.
So take a keen look at democracies that are doing well across the world. The G7 nations. The United States, Canada, Great Britain. Just take a look at these. They are
Germany.
the most sophisticated and advanced democracies in the world.
Yeah.
Why are they the most sophisticated and advanced democracy? That ties into economic and security issues,
Right.
right? It ties into economic and security issues. So a Canadian can afford to eat. Like, I have a job, maybe two, three
Mhm.
jobs, and I can take care of my family. Um, when there's an issue, once I call the police is there to. Police will not ask me for transportation. Like in the case of Liberia, police will say, "Pay my way." I'm not coming. It's late. So I am not secure in my own country. So then, how do I consciously make decision? For example, we have instances in Liberia where group of people will be given peanuts and they will be trucked from one county to the other or one district to the other, right?
Right.
So they are insecure economically. So once a man is insecure economically, his ability to make a comprehensive, his ability to make a more cognitive democratic decisions become hindered, right? It becomes
Yeah.
hindered. you know like, you don't have the financial autonomy, Anthony. You don't have the financial autonomy, so you get carried away by the candidate who who has a little bit of money and comes as a philanthropy. So even if that candidate does not espouse the vision and the aspiration of, the real issues,
Mhm.
but once he can afford to give you a bag of rice and give you a few dollars and few cents, I mean, like, you see him as a demagogue, you see him as a
Right.
source of survival, and he becomes, like, in the context of
Exactly.
Liberia, a good leader. The
Exactly.
man is good.
Exactly.
The man is good. The man good. He can give
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah.
In that context.
So then
So it's
decision now is based on what you get, and it's not
what you
based
get
on what is
temporarily.
even good for your constituency, what is good
Yes,
for your future. This is not what is good for your society. It's about what the
exactly.
person is focusing on what they get now.
Right. That becomes a problem. That becomes a security issue because in the long run, like, you know, when the man is elected, he's elected for 6 years, for example, or senator is elected for 9 years, for example. 9 years of your life isn't something small.
Mhm.
6 years of your life isn't something small. And it's not just your life, but it's the lives of your dependents, of family members. And that man is going to be making policy. So if that man lacks the ability to, articulate policy issues, the issues that
Mhm.
confront your society, if that man lacks the ability to postulate the real idea, the real issue that the society is confronted with, and formulate remedies to those issues, then you are headed nowhere. Then 6 years become a wasted year. That 6 year
If I
becomes
call it,
like a period where he can get rich and he takes care of himself. He rides the best of car, and after a few months to election, he comes with a few bag of right. So it becomes a security issue. So there's a physical security that we'll have to deal with, physical
Mhm.
security issue, where I can ably express myself without being coerced.
Mhm.
You media practitioners can broadcast without being censored,
Mhm.
where the people can gather and call on the attention of the government without police officers going to beat them, impressing
Mhm.
them, and all that. That's the physical security part of it. That, of course, lead to the thriving of democracy. And there's this economic side about it, where I have to be employed. I need survival. Society needs to survive in order to consciously make decisions. So, I mean, that's just the nexus or the link between security and democracy.
And Mr. Colley, let's talk about justice too, in terms of how is it related to election? The issue of justice, fairness in our judicial system, let's talk about that. How is that tied to, securing our election and making it free and fair?
So, according to the democracy barometer,
Hmm.
this institution that comes up with empirical statistics on countries that are democratic based on certain rubrics,
Hmm.
achieving certain basic elements. According to democratic barometer, um, justice, like you earlier mentioned, rule of law, those are essential, very essential component of democracy. You know,
Hmm.
in the state world, you know, when I'm confronted with issues, I can run to court, and the court can dispense justice without being biased. You know,
Hmm.
when I go to elections, for example, and I feel cheated, I can run to the court. But what we see in in our justice system or in Liberia is the other way around, and that is why average Liberians do not trust the justice system of their country. People who say, "Hey, I'm not going to court," and once a man decides not to go to court, he decides to use force. Then you know what happens? There's force, and of course there will be counter force. Everyone has alignment, people have connections, so that becomes a whole problematic issue. Now when a political party feels cheated, the political party doesn't trust the legal system, the political party doesn't trust the justice system. What that party resorts to becomes a security issue. Now, but if we have a justice system where the people believe in the system is fair, the system is not biased, the system the system is not corrupt. Well, a political party can say, hey, I'm going to court, because that party knows that at the end of the day, there will be justice will be dispensed, without any form of, bias and all that. So
Thank you.
yeah, justice is, of course, legal system. Our legal system is one of the many issues that we have to deal with in order to have a thriving democracy. Because the court, as you know, the court is like the arm of government. That the judiciary is like the arm of government where people run to for redress when there's issue. So
Thank you.
if the judiciary, of course, is not credible enough, and the security apparatus like the police, the military is not also credible, then who do we run to in terms of insecurity issue? Now,
Thank
if
you.
the government, for example, is not formulating policy that will alleviate poverty and create employment opportunity, that becomes an economic insecurity issue that we are confronted with. So where do we go, for example? Then there's this whole human security issue where I cannot walk freely, even broad day, with
Thank
my
you.
valuable. I cannot drive on Broad Street and park my vehicle. I'm insecure. So how is democracy now achievable in such a volatile insecurity society? So these are
Thank you.
issues that the government has to now begin to ponder on as we draw close to 2023 elections. I know it might be a little bit late to talk about these issues because these issues are very multifaceted, but it's still not late to begin to address some of the
To begin to
fundamental
address
issues.
them now. Thank you so very
Yes.
much. Well, folks in cyberspace, again, you are watching Focus on Liberia. James B. Colley is my guest. We are discussing election 2023, and we are looking at internal and external security issues that need to be addressed right now. They should start beginning to address them now so that we can have issues. You have to plan, and you have to be able to prevent. You need to have a strategy because it's coming. It's less than 2 years away now. Are we prepared? You got to find the resources. You have to find the personnel. You have to train them. So much, need to be put into place in order for us to have a free, fair, and transparent election. But maybe they're waiting for 2023 before they can even begin. That in
Might be
itself
too
will
late.
be a huge, huge. So, folks, we will take a short break. When we come back, we will read your comments. I displayed the number earlier. The number is also in the scrolling text. Please place your calls right now as we take the break. When we come back, we'll be reading your comments and we will be taking your phone calls. Stay tuned and we'll be right back.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jar.
Thank you, Dennis Jar. I'm Anson Nsie, hosting in today's edition of our program, The Freedom of Information Hour. Let's bring you some more commercial here. A Liberian-owned business has entered the money transfer market. It is called Canacash. Begin sending money to Liberia right now by using Canacash. You can go to www.canacash.com and you will be all set to send money to your loved ones in Liberia. You can also download the Canacash app from your Google Play Store or your Apple Play Store, and you will all be set to go. Canacash is a Liberian-owned business. Let us support one of our own and allow Liberians to get rich too. Let us stop making only Lebanese and other foreign nationals in Liberia rich. Well, today at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, our program, Tough Talking Thursday, will be live with Dennis Bakukenjuja. The topic, political turbulence in the CPP. President Wia's Christmas message. Is it a message what's that, a song? Well, they will be talking tough on the politics, and you do not want to miss it. And then this Sunday, Focus on Liberia present corruption and human rights. Our guest, Councillor James M. Verdier, he's a former chairman of the LACC, and Alice Coffey. Mr. Coffey is also the former director of the FIU, that's the Financial Intelligence Unit. These guys have their eyes very sharp on what is called corruption. You do not want to miss it. And again, it's Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and this program is hosted by Dennis Ja. Do not miss it. Mr. Colley, let us bring in some comments while we wait for calls. Folks, again, it is about time for you to call, and I told you, look in the scrolling text below. Look for this number on the screen, 605-313-6004. Enter the code 791-403 pound, and it's in the scrolling text below. Let's read some comments here quickly. Let's hear from Rahan Davis. Good presentation, bro. Somebody there is enjoying the presentation. Let's hear from Howard B. Jackson. Thanks for the informative presentation, Mr. Colley. And let's hear from Alfred Dennis. It's very sad that our beloved country does not really have security. Even from the presidential security, it's not that okay. Our NSA, where we are supposed to be doing good, is a shame for a country that is 174 years old. We don't have even a helicopter. Tell me about that. It will be good that the government come with law that every single man and woman, every single man and woman, he wrote, should serve before getting a passport. 3 years. Anyway, let me leave that part there. He made a point. I read it. Yeah, from Ma Famanta Bema grandson. Oh, the citizens gave their right to the state in exchange for security. It's I think he's quoting one Thomas right there. Like from William. Yeah, William Dunbar. I hope I got it right. They try hard with the English, but we understand. He's calling inflation. Well, this is not what we appreciate here. It's better in English, 100%. Anyway, let me leave that one. Let me speak to the topic, please. You're focusing on the English, the speaking. All right, let me leave that one. Saying you people want it for me. I speak crew better, not English. I don't know whether you're talking to me or someone else. Alfred Dennis again. First, our borders are not really secure, and it is very sad. Liberia need to learn from her sister Israel, small but powerful in everything. You can't be 174 years old and you don't have a better security. That's why all types of bad drugs are in Liberia, how they enter the country, the airport, or from the border between Liberia and her neighboring countries, maybe. They hear from Flomo Livingstone. The NSA, military and police need to be loyal to the state, not individuals. They hear from Bracewell writes, EPA is a decent security entity, and once you enter there, you are not a partisan, so there is no party business there. That is how it's supposed to be. That's the case. Bracewell said it was January 6th protest and not June 7th. Right? Yeah, we made that correction. Jose Human Bwaka's son, hey, Uncle Joe's son, we need to start to vote for NSA boss, police director, and defense minister in Liberia. That person is making an argument. We need to vote for them. That way, they are not loyal to the person that appoints them, but instead the people that vote for them. Let's hear from Eugene Hammer. Are you serious? Do you really know your constitution or your civic? I don't know who you're talking to. Let's hear from Stanley Fremont. Do you vote for security heads in America? That person is asking a question. Let's hear from Sam Wallow. What is the basis of this security discussion on election process, Anthony? Is winding people up again for absolute no reason. Sam Wallow is a very good critic of me and our network, and we love him for doing that. Sam, security is key. Sam Waller again. Is any of this happening today? Or Sam Waller, I think you're following the discussion. There are a lot of things that are happening right now. Brutus J. Hondo, or such rates are linked to the legal, operational, technical, political, security, and other. Let's hear from Levy Thompson. Election is 18 months away. You see, Sam Waller, election is 18 months away. Are we putting security into place for that? In all of the elections that have occurred since, since 2017, what were the indicators that are leading to these dooms and glooms assumption? He think we are assuming here. So, Mr. Colley, those are just few comments. The one that is critical, from what I read, is from our major critic here, Sam Waller, who we love so much for what he's doing always and always following. He's saying we're painting a gloom and doom picture here. And where are we looking for? We look at election in the past. Do we have any of these things that we talk? What's the significance of the discussion in the first place?
I think the fellow has to firstly ask himself why why over 15 years we're still considered a fragile state. And he needs to go back to understanding what a fragile state is. Because from a security perspective, you have strong states that have very strong architecture, and you also have weak state, and we also have fragile state. We also have failed state and collapsed state. So Liberia falls in the category of a fragile state, fragile state. We were a collapse, like a failed state, between 1989 up to 2003, we were a failed state. Now, given the fact that we've had some peace building, efforts between 2003, when we had, the intervention of ECOWAS in 1990, and we also had the peace building effort through the DDR program and security sector reform and all that. These were efforts geared towards ensuring that we have a strong state. But unfortunately, we still have lapses in, security apparatus. And that is why we are considered a fragile state. So he needs to go back to understand what a fragile state is and why would a nation be considered a fragile state. What are the reasons? What are the underlying reasons? So, we touched basically on all of the basic issues that will gravitate us towards having a sustainable democracy. So once we do not address these issues, like I earlier mentioned, if we do not address issues such as economic issues, we don't address ecological, environmental issues, we don't address human security issue, like security to a person, to an individual. If we don't address these issues, then that becomes a problem for our society. So we will keep voting over and over. It will appear as if there is no existential threat to the survival of the state. Now, when you look at Liberia
Mr. Colley, may I ask you that? Sam Waller question is that we have had elections since 2017. In other words, it's saying since President Weah got elected and took office 2018, we've had elections. We have by-elections here and there, representative and senator. And he said we are painting a gloom and a gloomy situation, a gloom and doom situation, and none of these things have happened.
And that's what
I
disagree with him. That's what I disagree with him. We are not painting a gloomy picture. We're not painting a gloomy picture of our society, of Liberia. Now, by having one or two elections that are relatively successful does not entirely mean that the state is safe. Election is just one component. For example, it's just one component towards ensuring that we have a society that has representation and all that. It does not in any way suggest that the society is safe. Now, look, for example, how many Liberians can afford food. That's a security issue. That's a human security issue, right? Now, look at the tensions that precede elections. It is a security issue. Now, look at the way we have political discussions. The way we engage political discussions, we do not oftentimes engage political discussion from a policy perspective. We are more sentimental and emotional, and that leads to outbursts. That is a problem that we also have to handle. So we are not painting any gloomy picture of our society, by having one or two successful elections doesn't in any way, suggest that the state is safe internally. It doesn't equally suggest that the state is safe externally. So, I'm not speaking like a regular kind of person. I'm not a politician. Let me make that point very clear. I'm not a politician, at least not now. I'm just speaking based on what is unfolding. And I'm just trying to postulate some remedies that the state could use or actors in the state could use and get away with the problems that we're confronted with. So it's no gloomy picture we are painting to the guy who just made that comment. There's no gloomy picture,
and
but there's
Mr.
a link
Colley, right?
between security and elections
here,
and democracy as
Mr.
well.
Colley, not interrupting you here. I like Sam Wallow, the way he comes at things, and it's a good thing, to actually broaden the discussion. But, if he were here or asking this question, is everything okay? We have election, the results, were announced, people took offices, who got elected. So that's all. We can improve that. Is that what he's telling us? Is he
Maybe
saying
that's
that
his definition.
those things
Maybe
that
that's his
happen,
definition of security.
yeah, those things that happen before, during, and even after these elections are just perfect. We don't have to work. It's all perfect. Is that why he's telling us? Or he just wants us
Perhaps.
to celebrate what we have and feed, content with that?
Yeah, we have the University of Liberia, for example, that has I think about 30,000 students. Every other time we have protests on the campuses of the University of Liberia.
Right.
We don't have electricity, even in Central Monrovia. We don't have water. Those are security issues,
Right.
And I'll say this, Anthony, I have never seen any group of people who are as resilient as Liberians. What is happening right now back home in Liberia will not happen in any country, say, for example, the US. There will be a mass protest. Recently in Kentucky, for example, we just had a fraction of a community that was hit by natural disaster, in Mayfield, Kentucky. Just Kentucky alone, just a fraction of the community was hit by a natural disaster. Now you see what the state is doing. The president visited, and there is this intervention that the federal government is making in ensuring that people regain their livelihood. Right now, I was personally, hit by a natural disaster in Liberia. I think 1 or 2 years ago. My roof was removed and all that. What happened? The government issued only a statement that we empathize with the victim of the storm, and the government is doing all it can to intervene into the situation, and nothing happened. Nothing happened. A whole community of over 2,000 inhabitants.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? Does that tell you that we are safe? Is that his definition of security? My human security at that point was under attack. It was not the fault of the government. It was a natural disaster. But again, what is the responsibility of the government? The responsibility of the government is to ensure that its subjects are safe and secure. And safety and security in this context will mean catering for the well-being, the emotional, psychological, and physical well-being of your citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Colley.
That is the security that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about people coming with firearm and firing in the city. Maybe that's his definition of security. I don't know whether he began this conversation, but we started off this conversation. We're looking at security from a state-centric approach, where the state looks at security from, hey, weapon proliferation, annexation of your territorial sovereignty and all that. Then we
thank you. I
drew
think
a connection from state security to societal security, So I was basically looking at societal and human security in this context and how it leads to, for example, the dysfunctioning of democracy.
Thank you. We have a caller on the line. That is Brutus J's honor. Brutus, let's hear you.
Hey, good evening, gentlemen. How you doing?
We're doing great.
Good evening.
First, let me extend my thank you, appreciation for hosting me, partaking in the show. And I want to commend my dear brother, James Colley, for his explicit explanation into the issues. Firstly, I just want to make a few points. We know that every country faces threats to national security. Some of the most common threats that we could see is the government works to keep their citizens safe. I think that should be one of our most and only focus as a government. And also, we look at democracy. Democracy depends on legislature that represents the citizens and oversee the executive independence. So, sorry, I'm from the law perspective. And what I see, if you look at the persistent cases of electoral violence, that create obstacles to democratic consolidation as institution. So electoral conflict, it remains an obstacle to consolidation of democratic institutions for many countries. So I think these are things that we need to look at as people, as government, to see how best we can put in mechanisms to eradicate some of these problems. We are a very old country, and we can't keep facing problems in this 21st century, and then we don't have any remedy or some solutions to our problems. So my dear brother James, I want to say hats up. Thank you for your explicit intellect, and I want to say thank you also for making me to put my ideas into the show. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, James. And James, before you come in here, I mean, the electoral violence, is that something that we can prevent? You laid the basis, right? The issue of economy, unemployment. You have a youthful population that is idle because there's no opportunity. The only thing that keeps them going is their attachment to these politicians, that they so ardently adore. They are willing to die for them. Imagine if their candidate now win when they believe that their candidate is the winner. That's a potential conflict there. A potential there for a huge conflict. Now, in District 15, in one of the elections that Sam was talking about, that, bread and butter, if I can put it that way for lack of better word, we had violence. People were throwing stones. The police were involved. Cars got damaged. I think in one of the counties there were another conflict there too. Can we prevent these things? Are these things preventable? These are the things we're talking about.
Well, yes, they are. I mean, they are preventable. Like, remember, I told you, I said that elections are sentimental issues, right? Sentimental issues. People, and that's why sometimes people are prevented from having, like, someone will say, if you are invited to a lunch, you are prevented, like, they tell you, hey, let's not discuss political issues or religious issues, because political issues and religious issues are sentimental issues. They are like they tie into our sentiments and our emotions, right? So it may not be like an eradication of electoral violence, but there can be a policy approach whereby electoral violence are minimized. Electoral violence is minimized to some level. I mean, even in advanced democracy, we've experienced electoral violence, like in the U.S. When Joe Biden was declared winner, we had supporters of Donald Trump who went on the rampage, and you remember the famous or the infamous Capitol riot.
Right. Yeah.
So those are issues that are part and parcel of society. But if measures are put into place, like I listed some measures that we could put into place as a state, these frequent electoral insurrections or violence can be minimized. Can be minimized. So if, for example, a group of people, for example, have sources of income, and I basic people, I have my job to do, I have my family to take care of, if I don't go to work, I will be penalized, for example. What time will I have, for example, to go and protest on behalf of a politician? What time will I have to want to jump into a fist fight for a politician, for example? We will have an intellectual and a civil discourse. I also talked about education. A society that is not educated, that society is susceptible to conflict. A society that is idle, that society is susceptible to conflict. So we need to begin to address issues such as education for our population. We need to address issues such as, economic issues for our population. We need to address, once we address educational issues, economic issues, you will come to realize that violence and the thought of violence will be reduced, will be minimized, and all that. So security nowadays is anchored on 5 pillars. 5 pillars. And that's called the reconceptualization of security. It's not just military. Security is economic. Security is environmental. Security is social. Security is societal. So let's begin to address these 5 integral pillars of security. Then we can be guaranteed of a democracy. Otherwise, we will always have what we consider fragile security sector, and all that. It would just be about going. It would just be about going to election, and it wouldn't be about democracy in its true
Mr. Colley,
context, because democracy has to ensure that the people are secure, the people are safe.
Mr. Colley,
Yes, sir.
time is our enemy. Always, time is man's enemy. So we have to leave it there. But you have clearly articulated, all the variables of security, and more so talking about election security or security around election, or those things that might lead to potential, election violence and all that, and how,
Right.
we need to be aware of them. And so let's talk about solution, as we close. And talking about that, we have a comment here from Frances C. Wilson. She wrote, said, there is a term. You are preaching to the choir. In other words, we are fully aware of the problems. What we want to hear from Mr. Colley is solutions. And so let's talk about solution for this coming election. What are the things that the government, the national government, can do right now to avoid any potential election violence, conflict, or whatsoever?
Great. And I like her point. Great. That's a very important point. We've identified all of the problems. So we need to at least find some solutions, some workable solutions to the problems that we've identified. So security is broad. So let's focus, for example, on human security issues. What are the issues that are existential to to the human being? What are the things we are threatened by? So can we, as a country, create opportunities, job opportunities, for example?
Right.
Can we invest, for example, in the private sector, in creating a more ecosystem where young people can have employment opportunities? That's one. Now, we have a huge cohort of young people who I not educated, they don't have any formal skill.
Mm-hmm.
Can we look at, for example, the Ministry of Youth and Sports? There's a department called the Department of Technical Education, TVET, something.
Mm-hmm.
Can we look at their policy and say, can we model the policy of other neighboring countries that are doing fairly well in terms of providing technical vocational education for its youth? For example, look at Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire. Can we invest in technical and vocational education? How can we take all of these young people who are in the ghettos, say on Flagbar, on Broad Street, on Benson Street? Can we go to Total Base? Can we take all of these people from the street and give them some skills, some livelihood skills, some skill set that will guarantee them a future? It's a way of ensuring that the society is safe and secure. It's not just about just bundling all of these, underprivileged young people that we call Zogo from the street, and after 1 month they come back on the street, and that becomes a circle year in year out, because those are the people that are posing, existential human security issue to the citizens. If you walk down the street, Ozogo will come and steal your item. We use machetes so these are issues we have to address. So let's
Exactly.
provide them skill set. Let's provide them opportunity. Once these young people have technical vocational education, they are given some opportunity to feed themselves and provide some livelihood that will help the society in minimizing crime.
Mr. Colley,
So that could be like
we have a last
primarily
caller yet.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying we have a last caller yet. Let a caller make her point, and then you can give your closing statement as you were trying to do here. Let's hear from Margaret. Margaret, welcome to Focus on Liberia. It's good to have you.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Mr. Colley, for good presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Security has always been an issue for me when it comes to Liberia, and you hit some main points. Even the guy that was in the comment section, that was I can't remember what his name is, but those are
Mr.
things
Sam
that
Wallow.
when I think about security in Liberia, it's something I shy away from because it looks so dreary. It kind of like it will not happen right now, and I think that stems from the government in place at the time. I'm not saying there were security doing other times when there were no there were no war, like trouble time or any time. I'm not saying there were perfect security, but there was some kind of security. Right now in Liberia, we have none, not a little bit. And it's so sad. I don't think the government even has security, the officials, but they are protected by those people that they pay to just protect them. For the real protection our country needs, they don't have it. And it is sad. It is sad that you cannot walk the street of Liberia, the street, and think you are safe. How do we get there? I like what he had to say today. A lot of things he had to say that were important or that are important. But how do we get to it? I think a change of government will do. And I think whoever comes there now, from now on, we should start looking at that. Officials should start looking at that. At least we can start something.
Margaret,
yeah.
Margaret, before you go, you said a change of government.
Yeah.
We'll correct that. We have changed government every time, and the situation remains the same. So why you think now this new change of government will do it?
No, I didn't mean that this one. The one before didn't either.
Okay.
The one before didn't either. The one after that, they didn't do anything either.
So why are you suggesting that then?
I'm suggesting that the people, the voters, he also talked about people who are dependent on what they gave them to vote for them. Our people need to stop voting for people that would pay them to vote for them. They need to look at their own security. They need to get into the game plan of fixing this country. That's what I'm talking about.
Margaret, I like why you said our people need to, they will always vote for somebody. Almost every person they voted for will tell them, I will do all of the things that you want to see. They are like literally helpless here. Everybody will say the same thing, right? So it has become difficult now. I don't think the problem is the people. I think the problem is more so about the people they elect. They are the one who are not fulfilling their promises. So it's not the people. That's the people who being elected. Do you agree?
I agree, but it also cuts both ways. How do we educate our people? Most of the time, I see one guy came at me saying that election has consequences. But when you do this, when you say those kind of things, how is the native man in the interior? What does he have to say? He's only relying on what they gave him and he votes. And those people are voting based on that. Liberia is based, the citizens, most of them do not understand what we understand. Illiterate based. They don't understand. And we put these things in writing all over the place. How are we going to these people? How are we educating our people? Making them to not be solely dependent on the government or on government officials.
And Margaret, again, if we should relate it to any other country other than Liberia, the U.S., for example, because we both live here, you and myself talking, talking about, so we know that, for example, the Democratic Party, I can argue that they feed their voters and their supporters with their talking points, and the Republican Party feed their supporters and their voters with their talking point. They even scare them that the Democrats are coming to take your guns away. They want to decide how you sleep. And these are all lies. They feed them with those things and they vote based on those lies and propaganda. How is it different in Liberia? It's the difference is that the leaders here, we can credit that they make better decisions. They build their roads, they do everything, provide electricity. That is the only difference. So I'm saying this to say that, it is not with the people. It's with the people they vote. Do you agree?
Really, I do. But I just trying to say too, people are not well equipped to battle these government officials that come to them. And when it comes to America, yes, all you said is the truth. That's what's happening. But we can deal with it. We can counterpunch.
Okay. So you are talking about holding them accountable. The citizens here holding them accountable. When they don't perform, they keep them out. And they protest against them when they're not doing the right thing, if in their government,
that's
right?
What I'm trying to say. Let them know who they are. Let them know their importance. Let them also know this idea that they are the employers. They are not the employees. They need to straighten up their employees.
Yeah, that's
the government.
That's a fine point there, Margaret. That's a fine point there, that the people here understand that those in government, they employ them, they pay their salary. But in Liberia, it's more than likely our people are, many of them, not all of them, many of them are yet to get to that point. They see these lawmakers, presidents, as though, those people owe them, owe them something, right? So I agree with that. Thank you.
Okay. I wanted to add something else.
Yeah, please do, and then we can take it from here.
What is, our people need to know that they have the power.
Okay.
And they cannot, they have the power, they need to use it. And maybe from there we can start picking up on the security issue of Liberia.
And how do they use that power other than just voting? How do they use that power other than just voting?
How do they use that power? They can get up and talk.
Okay.
They can get out of their homes and stop being a coward. They need to get up and stop being afraid of these people. You can do it. They can do it. We need to empower our people with the knowledge that they are superior. They can make it.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent point there, Bankra. We appreciate you calling in. That was enriching to the conversation. Mr. Colley, time. Let's get your closing statement, and you can close on Margaret's contribution as well.
Great. Margaret made very important points. Very important points. I think she summarized basically everything we've been talking about, right? So the government is clothed with the responsibility of providing security to its people. And that security will mean that the government has to protect the territorial sovereignty of the state. That means the borders of the state. And the government also has to protect the internal security of the state, which will mean that societal security issues have to be addressed. Human security issues have to be addressed. because these are issues that are interlinked, they are tied into democracy. She talked about the people getting up to call on their government, that because now if the human security of the people is not guaranteed, how do they go out to call on their government? For example. So
Right.
the government is called with the responsibility of ensuring that. So if the government fails on its responsibility of ensuring that the people are safe, then it becomes a problem. Then it becomes a fragile system. It becomes a failed system in some context. And democracy, of course, under such a system cannot be guaranteed. So as we draw close to 2023 elections, it's very important that we talk about these major issues. Let us not just look at election. Elections is just a day's event, but what happens after elections? What happens before elections? So we need to talk about these issues. So someone was talking about solution here. I talk about how we could get our young people involved into the productive sector of our economy. Technical and vocational education. Let's invest in education. Let's invest in education. There's no successful society, there's no stable society in the world that does not have educated people, because education becomes the catalyst, to having a vibrant society. And of course, education, of course, is a catalyst to democracy. So there is this whole what we call threat multiplier in security, threat multiplier. When one insecurity is not addressed, it leads to several other insecurities. So if education, for example, is not addressed, it leads to what? An issue. If unemployment issue is not addressed, it leads to several other issues, because it's instinctive that I need to survive. If I don't have a job, what happens? I get on the rampage. I need to survive. As someone would say, the first law of nature is self-preservation. So government needs to ensure that people are given skills, young people, our brothers who are underprivileged, that we consider Zogos, do not just have to be taken out of the street, but they have to be taken in a way that they're given some skill set that they can now be um, 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 put back into the larger society. And they are coming back into the larger society will mean that they are contributing to the socio-economic development of the country, which eventually will give them some sources of livelihood. By that, we are gearing gradually to becoming a strong state, a state that is not fragile, a state where our security apparatus and it's not compromised, a state where our human security is protected, where people like you can purchase your vehicle, you drive, you park your vehicle, your battery will not be stolen, you will not be harassed on a broad daylight. So these are issues we have to address. Election is good, but it's not just about holding the power. It's about ensuring that you perform the core functions or core duty for which you were elected. So we can talk about election all we want, but if security is not guaranteed, if security is not at the topmost priority, then it means we are headed nowhere. Our democracy will just be one of failed democracy. Over time, we will have insurrections, we will have violence, we will have protestations, we will have all of these mishaps as we move forward towards that. So again, security must not just be looked at from a state-centric approach, having a military or a police. We must look at security from 5 pillars. We must look at economic security. We must look at, of course, ecological, environmental security. I talked about these issues. We must look at societal security as well, which ties into human security. Then we should look at social security. So these are the 5 dynamics, the reconceptualization of security in the 21st century that we need to look at as a country as we draw close to 2023 elections.
Mr. Colley, it was good having you. Thanks so very much for your contribution. I believe our listeners were able to learn, a lot from you. Folks, this is how we will come to the end of this program, the Freedom of Information Hour here at Focus on Liberia, where we educate, we elevate, and promote all things Liberia. Well, folks, as you know, this is Focus on Liberia, and we are saying to you, happy season greetings, Merry Christmas to you, and a prosperous New Year. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you.